Hi, everyone. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how the Capstone experience and Capstone project can be connected and how, your experience can then inform, your project. So to do this, I created this example, okay, and I based this off some of my own work, and so hopefully this is helpful. So in this kind of again, you know, possible capstone experience situation. Perhaps you're working for an organization that runs group homes for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And something you're focusing on in your experience is working on program development around creating a self-advocacy group and bringing kind of an OT lens to that. And self-advocacy as an occupation, and that is also going to include training participants, the adults with IDD, to lead the group and to take on kind of those group roles, as well as working with direct care staff to support the group, including after you are finished with your capstone. So, some of your deliverables for this experience could be, creating a program manual, right? Or different resources around the group that you'll, leave with the site. Before you even start the program development, probably engaging some needs assessment and talking with the different stakeholders about what they're looking for and what they need in kind of this area, and, bringing in the literature that you found on the topic and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, really creating those program materials, any training materials that you're using to lead the group, and then any, training and carryover materials that you're using with the direct care staff. So let's take a look at I thought of 6 possible projects that could come from, again, kind of this general experience. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list. So let's take a look here. So for project example number 1, you could take this experience and really look at a project that focuses on OT's role in self-advocacy for adults with IDD. And so you could use the work you're doing at the site in terms of really focusing on sharing the process of creating the group, what was the group structure and resources, what outcomes did you measure and how did you measure them, and really rooting it in, the scope of practice of OT, philosophy and theory, as well as providing some kind of background, literature that you found. So that's one example of kind of how your project could develop from this experience. And so what you would want to be doing is, in addition to deliverables that you would be creating for the site, you would also really want to be documenting the process, right? So documenting your needs assessment, documenting how you developed the group, and what were some takeaway? What did you learn from that process? What went well? What didn't go well? How did you develop those resources, right? How did you develop outcome measures? How did, those sorts of things. So while you don't have to turn in a formal manuscript, you probably will have some sort of document, right, that you are using as a place to keep this information that you're then going to shape into your project poster and poster presentation. So for project example number 2, another option could be that you have worked on an IRB and you have designed a outcome study for this self-advocacy group. So you've really done a lot of the work on the front end and are going to really focus on evaluating the group and collecting and analyzing data, whatever that is that you've decided to collect in whatever ways you've decided to collect it. Whether that's potentially pre and post intervention assessment data, maybe it's, it could be qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods. And so your project then would really be your research study. Okay. And so again, you don't need to, although you could as part of your experience, if your site is invested in you developing, a manuscript or something to that effect, develop a manuscript, but it's not required, but you would have some sort of collection of your data analysis. Maybe you're making some visuals of the data, like tables and figures. You've documented the method that you've used and the measures, and again your analysis. And again, that process. So then you take that document, that report that you've started to compile, and you put it into your project poster and poster presentation. So another example could be number 3 down here, that you want to develop a case study. So you're going to select, let's say, one participant who is participating in your group that you're developing, and really do a deep dive into that person's experience, their perspectives on the group, as well as any outcome measures that you would want to have, and kind of use a case study format. This would require not a full IRB proposal, or even an exempt proposal. There's a couple different types of proposals, but it doesn't even require a full proposal of any sort. It just requires a IRB jurisdiction form that you need to file. And certainly if that is something folks are interested in, you haven't spoken to me about it, let me know. I'm happy to help kind of guide through that process, and your faculty advisor should be involved in that as well. But so again, you don't need to produce a formal, ready for publication manuscript, but you would have some sort of document that you were collecting, your case study information on, that you would then use to form your poster and your poster presentation. So over here, some other examples. So number 4, so maybe you decide to that you're really interested in kind of the sustainability and knowledge translation aspect of your experience. So that would really be rooted again in how do you get the direct care staff, on board with continuing this group and supporting self-advocacy of the people they're working with. That may be one angle. And so you could take a knowledge translation framework or model. And again, there's some resources that Hallie has provided around particularly the knowledge to action framework, but there are many knowledge translation frameworks. So maybe you take that and you are using that in your project to really look at the sustainability of the group. Okay, so you could, so you're really applying, right, this model to the experience that you're working in. And so you would really look at, again, like how do the steps or parts of that framework and model map over the work at the group home that you've done, and maybe it's focusing on sustainability with staff. Maybe it's focusing on sustainability with adults with IDD. It could be, a whole number of things. And so you'd really look to not only at, again, showing that application, but also including recommendations and implications for OTs. So again, you'd probably have some sort of report, some documentation of this process, and, creating some visuals, some figures, something like that, right, that you would include in a poster. And again, I use the example of knowledge translation framework or model, but it could be, a number of different things, frameworks, models, and maybe you kind of, again, focus in on that aspect. Like, how do you apply a certain theory, a certain model to the, experience kind of setting, practice area. Okay. So number 5 here. So maybe I decide that I would like to do a scoping review that looks at effective interventions for supporting self-advocacy for people with IDD. Okay, so scoping reviews have a set kind of guidelines for methodology, and again, there's ways to make visuals about it. A visual of the methods, tables of the results, or some other visualizations of the themes and other results that you find in the scoping review. So again, while you wouldn't need to write a full scoping review for your capstone, you could, you would have elements of that, and maybe more informal kind of document that you would then turn into your poster. And again, it's really important to just make sure that you're considering the recommendations and implications for OT. You always want to be thinking about how can you make sure that your project is rooted in OT in some way. And so for the last project example, maybe I want to look kind of outside the field of OT and look at, for example, in intellectual disability research, there's a lot on self-determination, and that is kind of a concept, and then best practices in supporting that for people with IDD. So you may want to look at integrating that with kind of OT, right? And into OT theory and philosophy. And maybe, again, similar to some of the other ideas, maybe use the group as an example, or something, maybe other elements of your experience as a way that you took kind of best practices in self-determination work and applied that with and kind of, again, integrated that with OT, and that sort of thing. So again, these are just 6 possible options from this one kind of capstone experience. And so I hope this is helpful in kind of thinking about, how to focus in on some sort of kind of scholarly aspect of your work to create your project, and how you kind of take that and turn it into the poster and the presentation that will go with it. So this is a conversation that we'll continue to have throughout the capstone semester, and certainly reach out if you have any additional questions about the video. Thank you.